Hi, this is Brian Craddock, and welcome to my living room. This is my worship response for Temple. I went to a service in the end of March, on the 24th of March. I went to the 10 a.m. Shabbat service at a place called Temple Israel. And Temple Israel is one of the oldest Jewish establishments, one of the oldest temples in Memphis. It's been around for over 150 years. And it's got all kinds of really cool history. In fact, they even have a museum sort of housed in the building. It's a really new, very modern building of brick and glass, and it's actually a really cool structure. And it's really interesting to see how much history plays into just the way that they've put everything together in their church, and the way that history has sort of defined these people. I mean, this religion, I guess, has been around for thousands of years. Even thousands of years more than Christianity, and Christianity finds its roots from the Jewish faith. And so, anyway, I went to Temple Israel, which is in Memphis, and the rabbi who led the service, his name is Rabbi Micah Greenstein. That's his name. He's a senior rabbi at Temple Israel, and he's a really powerful speaker. And I'll kind of get to some of the stuff that he talked about a little bit later in the video. As far as the music goes, I kind of shuffled around. It's a really big congregation. It's a big room, big sanctuary, I guess you would call it. I'm not sure of the terminology links between Protestant faith and Jewish faith. I don't know. But this sanctuary, for all intents and purposes, is a very large place, which was kind of a little shocking to me, actually. I always pictured Temple as always being really small. But the music that was played was actually really cool. It sounded so much different than the way music sounds, the way that I grew up in the Protestant faith, at least to a point. That there was, some of the similar instruments they used at Cajon, acoustic guitars, obviously their voices. So some of it was the same, but structurally, like chord structures were different. It was really cool. I mean, they sang in Hebrew, which obviously that's very different. And the melody lines were very minor. It sounds very Middle Eastern, which is, makes a lot of sense. And a lot of the songs that they sang were older songs, songs that have been written for who knows how long. I didn't ask how long, probably thousands of years, some of them. And then every once in a while you would hear one that sounded a little bit like a Chris Tomlin song, but sung in Hebrew, and they would, the worship leader would say, I wrote this song a couple of months ago, or something. And one of the jokes that he said was the trick with Jewish music is that you have to write new music, which is encouraged in the Psalms, but you have to make it sound really old, was what he said. And so I thought that it was a really cool way to incorporate these two styles of the modern and the ancient, and just kind of link them together. And actually, the history of music is really kind of wonderfully linked together. The Knoer, I guess, is how you say it. I don't remember how to pronounce it exactly. It was essentially like an ancient lyre or stringed instrument to be played with your hands, very much like a guitar. Drums were a part of music in Middle Eastern music, still are, but they're mentioned in scriptures in the Old Testament, and so it was really cool to kind of see the same types of instruments played, but a more modern kind of take on them. Which also, the textbook goes into how, as instruments evolved, the music itself kind of evolved in the Jewish church, how they began to pick up lutes, in the Roman times, and how music was just sort of at the heart of the Jewish faith. So as far as liturgy goes, it was actually kind of hard to follow. They partly because a lot of it was in Hebrew. Um, but it was obviously like, very, very structured. Um, there was, the worship we sang for probably half an hour, or they did. I didn't know the music and don't speak Hebrew. I mean, it was written. You um, you could have your like a bulletin, I guess, and you could read along, and I could read, but I don't read Hebrew either, so that was tricky. And it was, well, I mean, it was the Romanization of Hebrew. You could sound it out, I guess, but it was still really tricky, and I didn't try. Um, at least not very hard. And so, one of the cool things is to be able to kind of follow along with the liturgy as much as I could. It was, like I said, it was a little tricky, but to see that it clearly was very structured, and we sang through, and there was some like call and response singing, which was really cool. Obviously, like I said, there was the new music that sounded really old. There was the old music that also sounded really old that everyone seemed to know. That's when everyone really kind of chimed in. And then it moved on to what I was actually really surprised by was a female rabbi got up and did some announcements and did some sort of I guess housekeeping items for the temple. And I just was unaware that in more modern Jewish faith, it's not out of the ordinary to have a female rabbi, and I had no idea. And so there was a lot of commonality between a temple and church growing up, and church even now. Some of the commonalities lie just in the structure. We sing at the beginning. They also sing at the beginning. It just really kind of tills the heart and gets ready the spirit to receive from Scripture. Actually, some of the commonalities are to the point that I forgot I was at temple. While Rabbi Greenstein was speaking, he was going through the story of Noah, and it was incredible to listen to him talk about Noah and talk about God, talk about the same God that I believe in, the same God that I've heard of, the same God that's in that story that I've heard preached 1,000 times, and speak about the same things and make the same points, and move up to Abraham and to talk about how Noah was seen as a righteous man, but somehow it's from Abraham that the Jewish people come. And then all of a sudden there was this shocking blow, like a sack of potatoes, that just said, this is where the story stops for them. And it's when he said, this is the man that our people come from. This is where we get our name, is from Abraham. And he went into some detail of why. It was really interesting, just the commonalities that lie between how I grew up and how Jews kind of grow up. Is all based out of a lot of the same code, I guess, is a strange way to put it, but the Old Testament rules and regulations, the Ten Commandments, the same morality code, even the same God that we worship. And so obviously, it breaks down when I say that Jesus is the Son of God and he was the Messiah and died and raised again, and these are not Messianic Jews, so they don't believe that. They don't agree with me. So the commonalities sort of end there. So I guess that would be where the differences lie, is where the Jewish faith sort of stops at Abraham, and you continue on as believers in the faith of Abraham, but there is no next step. There is no jump to Jesus. There is no promise fulfilled of the Messiah. There is just the promise that they're holding on to, and that's a huge difference. They talk about Abraham and they wait for the Messiah, and we speak of Abraham as a man who points to the Messiah that we know, that we love, and who has died for us. So anyway, I think that, and obviously one of the main differences is that there's very, very little Hebrew in my church growing up, in my church now, and so my experience at Temple was really special. It was a really unique way for me to remember that just because I'm a Christian and someone may be a Jew does not make us actually that much different, at least on the level of human beings. Obviously our beliefs are drastically different, but it was pretty unique and wonderful to get to know some of these people, however briefly. Um, I didn't actually get a chance to meet with the pastor, but it is really cool. Like architecturally, the building is really modern. It's really kind of sleek and cool. It's got a red carpet in the sanctuary, and it's got a big balcony. And but my favorite part, was actually just behind the I guess pulpit. I don't know what they call it that. I don't know where the terminology lines up, but behind the pulpit was this really cool, almost like a grate, and it had like electric lights behind it, but it looked like this pillar of fire. And obviously, my mind it just races back to the Old Testament, to where God is pictured as leading them from through the desert from Egypt. As the first time he shows up as a pillar of fire to protect them from their enemies, and then as that same pillar of fire to guide them through the desert, at least at night. And so there's just a really cool kind of. No one said anything. No one even pointed at it or whatever. I just recognized it and thought, oh man, that's really cool. We have completely different symbolism. We have cross. We usually have a cross behind the pastor, or a dove over the baptistry, and these our Jewish brothers and sisters have this really cool picture of God leading them and saving them from captivity, which is very much what the cross and the baptismal, like these symbols of freedom and redemption for Christians. To a Jew, that pillar of fire is that same symbol of redemption and protection and love from God. So this was my visit to temple. I mean, there's so much more than 10 minutes allows me to pour into it. I have so much more in my head and in my heart, and I've been working through a lot of it, actually. Just wondering how the best way would be for me to love a Jewish man or woman as a brother, as a neighbor. Anyway, there's so much that's still stirring in my heart and still moving me forward, and I'll probably visit a couple of more times just to kind of build relationships, and I'm just so intrigued by the whole thing. So anyway, that was my worship reflection on temple. And I'm really grateful to have had this opportunity. I wouldn't have gone probably to a temple service if it hadn't been for this opportunity. So I'm very grateful.